Hi there. Welcome to the hEireann podcast with me, hEireann, the podcast that celebrates Irish women at home and abroad. We will hear 3 defining moments, what hEireann and being an Irish woman means to them. We find out their favourite Irish saying, and we will even find out if they prefer Barry's tea or Lyons tea towards the end of the podcast. I would be really grateful if you could give the podcast a follow. That way you will be told when a new episode has been published. And I am aiming to publish a new episode every Tuesday. Fingers crossed. All the podcast interviews are also on the manonaheireann.ie website too. Now, to this week's guest. She is an Irish educator whose career has been defined by resilience, international experience, and a deep commitment to literacy. She taught English and religion at secondary school level in Ireland before spending 2 years in the UK and then moving to Sudan, where she lived for 12 years, working across primary and secondary school settings before the war broke out in April 2023 and she and her family had to escape. She is from Mayo and lives in Mayo. Kathy McLoughlin, welcome to the hEireann podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm
It's
delighted.
so lovely. Say that again.
Delighted to be here.
Yay! Just for people listening, so I try my best to explain kind of how I'm linked to the guest. I might not be linked at all to the guest, but whether they've come in through a recommendation or it's a friend. And Kathy, so Kathy, one of Kathy's brothers, Thomas, is one of my best friends, and I met Thomas through my friend Adam when we all went to college in Dublin a long time ago. And then when I announced to the world that I was doing this podcast, Thomas messaged me straight away and was like, right, I've so many sisters that could be on this. They're all great. Who do you want? One's in the US, one's in Canada, one's here in Ireland. And so I'd lots of you to choose from. But Kathy, myself and Kathy know each other for a long time. And also the Sudan, you'll be talking about it later, but you have a fantastic, interesting story about Sudan, about living there, but also then obviously, a very, I don't know how to put it, is it traumatic or difficult situation when you left Sudan? Um, but yeah, so I know all your family. I know your mum and dad. Met them all. Pat in Australia as well. I think I've mentioned all of them. But yeah, so thank you for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. And yes, we've known each other for an eternity.
We can't talk about the parties we went to in Dublin city centre.
I'm sure why not?
Why not? Another time. So Kathy, you're well aware now from me telling everybody on social media that the premise of the podcast is 3 defining moments. And I'm just wondering if you could tell us your first defining moment.
Yes. So resilience is an interesting word, because how we get there really depends on our experiences. Um, I think if you've only ever experienced success, it's hard to say you've had resilience, but I think it's awfully hard to build resilience only on failure. I think when people, especially my students, if I see them just, if I see a student that has consistently failed, I think it's very difficult for them to be resilient because they haven't experienced the joy or the self belief that they can actually succeed. And I myself had experience of failure. And that was in my very first experience of university. Um, so I failed out the first time. I worked for a few years. I gathered loads of life experiences, as you know, and I ended up making the decision to return to university to do it properly this time when I was 25. Um, and I decided to do religion education and English because I was really interested in writing at the time. And I liked the idea of becoming a teacher. Um, but I was terrified of that first essay because that's what happened when I was in UCD the first time round. Um, let's say it wasn't a very pleasant experience, and I failed repetitively due to a lack of experience with bibliographies and all sorts of things like this that I just I didn't have the experience with. So my very first essay that I had to hand in was in Christian ethics. And it was apparently to the strictest, most pedantic lecturer who ended up being absolutely wonderful. Um, but when I got the essay back, I cannot explain how shaking, like I was absolutely petrified. I saw myself in my mind's eye, literally turning around and walking out the doors because I didn't have resilience. I had failed once in that period of time. I mean, I guess it was repetitive failure, but like that whole experience was a failure in that first go to university. And that had kind of shot my confidence. And I was ready to walk. I genuinely did not think that anything good could happen from my opening of my essay. Ju- And when I opened it and he was standing in front of me, he handed them to us all individually. I'd gotten 70%, which is a first class honours. And in Ireland, lecturers don't really give above that. So it was a really, really, really good grade. And I was just on cloud nine. And I think getting such a good grade on that very first essay that I did, it set me up and it gave me the confidence so that even when I did have a few knocks, and I had a few knocks as I went through the remainder of that 4 year course. Yourself, you visited me in hospital when I had the pneumonia, and I had, there were lots of things that happened, but that could have set me back. But that one moment of success set me up to be resilient. So I finished university. Now, another reason I went for this particular combination of subjects was because, English, you're needed everywhere. Religion in Ireland, it's a great one to have under your belt. I grew up in a very religious household, and I really enjoyed studying it. Um, and then the 2008, 2009 crash happened. And there were no jobs in Ireland, and my game plan had to change like that. So I had a huge student loan. I had no option. My parents had guaranteed it, and I did not want them to feel the burden of that. Um, so I before I even got my final exams, I had a job in the UK. Went to the UK. I enjoyed my 2 years. I got a lot out of it. Um, Thank you so much to all the people in the UK who I got to know and who looked after me and took me under their wing. Um, but it was also a very lonely time for me in the UK, not because of the people, but because that loan had me crippled. I couldn't go out. I couldn't enjoy myself. I couldn't go and visit things. I felt like a prisoner. And unless I was working or unless I was, it was a horrible, horrible time of my life when I wasn't being looked after and like it was so at the end of the 2 years, at the end of my 2 year contract, I decided to look for employment abroad. And I looked at the wrong time of the year because
Good
apparently
one, Kathy.
yeah, yeah. Well, I make my decisions on the hop. I do, and what happened was it was April, and apparently when you're looking for international jobs, you should really look between November and January. That's the big recruitment time. Um, and they all know who they're getting in before that. And if anybody, kind of leaves or decides not to come, that's when you get second rounds of interviews. So I guess I got a few of those. So I applied for 3 jobs. I got interviews for all three. The first interview was for a job in Abu Dhabi, and halfway through the interview, they started asking me about primary school teaching, and I had no interest whatsoever in becoming a primary school teacher. I love my Shakespeare, I love my poetry, I love my drama, I love my teenagers so much. I just couldn't envision myself in those surroundings. Um so I just excused myself from the interview once I realized that they expected me to go over and teach primary and then possibly move into a secondary position. I said, "Thank you very much," and I left. And then the second interview was the best interview of my life, and that was for Sudan. And this wonderful lady who was the best boss the best direct boss. I've had some other wonderful bosses both there and elsewhere. But she was just so spot on, so wonderful, so motivational, so energetic. And I knew it from the interview and I said, I have to work for this lady. So I actually cancelled the third interview, which was for a position in Port Moresby, Papua New Guinea.
Love it. Love it. You didn't care where you went.
The three jobs that were there, got all interviews, and was like, okay, I can make a decision.
Yeah.
And the wonderful thing about getting the job in Sudan was that my granny's little brother, Father Henry, had been a priest in Sudan in the 1950s and the 1970s. And there was a picture of him standing beside the school that I was going to work for. And he was also based in a different city, which is now part of South Sudan, Malakal. Um, so there was that family connection, and he had always, now I never met him. He died the year of my birth, but he was constantly in conversation. Um, whenever I was with my granny or even my dad. And, he was always talking apparently about how lovely the Sudanese people were. And they were so amazing.
You know, when you said that so who is your grand uncle?
My granduncle. Yeah,
Yeah.
he was my granny and him were the two youngest, and they used to get into so much bother. The stories that they got up to when they were small, it was unreal. And, like you almost feel like you know him, but he
Yeah,
died
I
in a
know.
car crash in, I think, San Francisco before I was born.
Say that he died in a car
In a
crash, is
car
it?
crash. Yes, yeah. So he would have been quite young, I guess, in his 50s or 60s, I would imagine maybe.
Sorry to hear that. Gave me goosebumps when you mentioned that he had worked in Sudan and that his picture was up in the school that you were teaching at.
Yeah, because my school was a Christian school in a Muslim country. Now, the school that I was with mainly Muslim students. Um, yeah, so it was a
How
one.
does sorry. How does that work?
So the reason it's called Unity High School is because it's a unity of churches. So all the Christian churches, except for the Catholic Church, was a part of it. But the director, when I joined, was actually Catholic, so he was delighted to have me on board as well. And across the road was another school, which was Comboni, and that was a Catholic school for boys. And then there was a church across the road from the school as well, called, I can't remember the name of the church, but the church was right across, and I used to go to mass there every once in a while.
Oh, so you are allowed to practice Catholicism, I can never say that word, um, in Sudan.
Oh yeah, yeah. There was even a Vatican embassy there. I used to go there occasionally for a fancy mass.
Are you serious? This is
Oh,
great.
yeah,
We'll
yeah.
have
The only thing they didn't like was when I think Christian missionaries would come. So like, and they were trying to convert people to Islam. That's what they went hard on. So like, there was some teachers who would go there with the explicit intention of, you know, recruiting people to Christianity. And I remember there was this lovely young couple, and they were lovely. They were really lovely. But that was their goal in life, to to convert as many people to Christianity as they could. And they had an awful time. They were constantly being, not necessarily harassed, but followed, obviously, by the intelligence everywhere they went. And eventually they left. But for
where
me,
they from?
they're English. Yeah, and you'd meet other people from various other places, but yeah, so evangelical Christians, they kind of struggled with that. Um, but for like, there's a whole tradition of Catholicism within Sudan as well. Like there's the sisters school, which used to teach only girls as well. And if you look at, oh, this amazing Alayla Abu Layla, she's a wonderful Sudanese author, and she's written in English. She's written the most beautiful books. But like, her characters actually would have gone to these schools.
Really? She's inspired.
Yes, yeah, 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 absolutely. But also her characters would have been like middle class, upper class. So you're looking at, like institutions that would have, carried education through, certain groups of people would have definitely been a Unity High School graduate. Like Unity High School, the school that I was at, was over 100 years old.
Wow.
Yeah, it was the oldest
Fascinating.
school in Khartoum. Yeah. It
Go
was
say that again. It was the
it was the
oldest.
oldest, not the oldest school, sorry, the oldest school for girls. And by the time I got there, it was a mixed school.
Ah, so fascinating, Kathy.
Did I
Okay.
go on a little ramble again? I think I did.
No, no, Kathy. Keep telling you you're very interesting. Okay, so let's move on to your second defining moment.
So I went to Sudan and I began working there, and within a year I became the head of English, which honestly, I hadn't been that interested in moving up through the ranks of academics. I felt like I just loved in the classroom so much. Um, but due to various different circumstances, I took the opportunity, got the interview, and I discovered I loved it. I loved maneuvering the little pieces into place, and I loved it was just a wonderful experience, and I worked with some amazing teachers. Um, and then in the meantime, I also met my husband, who was part of this amazing moment, and he's Sudanese. And we got married. And after I had my first child, I finished out the year and I took some time off to tutor. So this whole section is kind of like a whole moment. But when I was tutoring, I learned how to really target my instruction because it's one to one. So you're like, how do I get this specific child or a teenager, but I ended up with a bunch of really teeny tiny children that I was not familiar with and I was learning on the go. But how do I move this child from here to here? And how do I get to that child? And how do I interest that particular child? And that kind of made me a much more, um, I would say almost scientific teacher. I was focusing on how to bring that child success. And I had a huge thing about writing a report after every set of 10 lessons and giving it to the parents and saying, please share this with the classroom teacher, share this with the school. They need to know how to, and if there's anything from them, I would be very interested in that. So the following year, I was followed around Ireland when I was home for the summer. And so they were asking me to become a primary school teacher in this IB curriculum school. And I loved the idea of teaching IB because it's all about student agency and inquiry based learning. And these are all things that I was finding very fascinating at the time. But it was primary school. So I really had to weigh up the pros and cons of that. But they said that I could slide straight over into secondary if there was a position in the English department. And once they said that, I was like, wow, this is such an experience. And the school was so beautiful. It had 3 libraries, it had 2 swimming pools, it's tennis courts and basketball courts. I mean, if I had to pay for that school, it would be, I think, somewhere between 25 and $35,000 a year per child. So at the end of that year, I returned after having Liam, and I came back and I handed in my notice. I said, "Thank you very much. Obviously, I have a tradition of taking time off after having a baby, and I'm going to do the same thing now."
Yeah, good for you.
Yeah, and I ended up going becoming a tutor, except I did it much more strategically this time. Um, and I started building up a company, and I started training in some teachers, and I started doing it a little bit more professionally in schools. And then COVID happened, and that's when I became really hyper focused on how literacy works, because up until now everything I did was based on what I had learned in university, which is basically all of the philosophy of education, but no real science underpinning it. Like, how do we learn? How does the brain make those connections? Um, and I, during COVID, all of these world renowned experts in dyslexia, in neurology, in linguistics. They opened their doors of knowledge. And you had these amazing, fascinating people suddenly do lectures online for free for the whole world. And there's this guy in California who did 5 nights a week, 3 hours every evening for, I think, about 6 weeks. And because I was in Sudan, that was from 11 p.m. until 2 a.m. for 6 weeks.
Your time when you were awake. You were awake for those.
Yeah, yeah, I stayed up every night. I didn't miss one. I was so, so fascinated
What's his
by
name?
oh gosh. Oh, I'd have to um
Don't
sorry.
worry, don't worry. Google him before we finish the record because maybe people listening might actually want to know more about him. So when you get
Yes.
a chance, when I'm asking a question,
I'm really bad at multitasking. I either
you're
hyper
just
focus or don't focus at all. You might suddenly see me go off into a daze or something.
exactly. Because he does sound fascinating. So if you, Kathy, can you just Google him there?
I think it was Learn Up, Steve Hagler.
Steve Hagler.
Yeah, and it was called Learn Up, and it was in California. And there were two men. I think there were two Steves, and one of them was the main guy. I'm not sure which Steve Hagler was, but Steve Hagler, yeah, he was
Okay.
amazing and gave so many like so much of his work for free. Like it was really unbelievable.
Yeah, it's like what is it, paying it forward, like doing something
Yeah.
nice and putting it out there and hopefully it comes back. But I mean, that shouldn't be the reason why you're doing something nice, but paying it forward.
And so many places did it. There's this program called Specialized Program in Reading Excellence, and they made all of their books for free. And if you were to buy the newest editions now, you'd be looking at 4 or 5 thousand just for one set. And they just made them free because they understood that children were going to be left behind by what was happening in education during this time.
Yeah, and they cared.
And you see, that's the thing. And often we just think of these companies and these groups as just, being obsessed with money and, needing wanting to make a quick buck or whatever. But no, they put their money where their mouth was during COVID and they made like it free to people like myself to help kind of mitigate what was going to come along. And it's here today. There are people whose reading and writing will possibly never recover because they missed some of those initial steps.
Yeah, yeah, it's very sad, really. Um, but thanks to teachers like you and my sister, for caring, about the children in their classes. Okay, so your third defining moment.
Okay, so this is the tricky one, where I'm going to try and just refer briefly to the experience of being caught unexpectedly in a war zone. So on the 15th of April 2023, war broke out. We were trapped in place for about 5 days. On the fifth day, we walked out. We had a few encounters with various soldiers, which thankfully nobody was hurt. We stayed in a friend's house for 2 days. We finally made it on the seventh day to an airport in the middle of the desert. I think the eighth day, actually. And then we flew to a place called Djibouti. And then we had to stay there for a few days. My husband's Sudanese, so getting him into Ireland, we had to wait for the Irish government to issue him a letter, which they did. And once again, a big shout out to the people in the Department of Foreign Affairs. They did help an awful lot. Um, and we people who are evacuated do actually pay for their evacuation. They don't pay for their initial like move out of the danger zone. But like from Djibouti, we paid our way, but the Irish government did everything to make sure that that cost was minimized to the point where we actually hitched a ride in a Hungarian military aircraft, which I think is hilarious. So we landed in Ireland. We had lost our everything. Like when you think of the thousands of books and resources and screens, because I had a whole tutoring center. At that time, I was also head of a primary school. So I had two bases. I had my tutoring center and my apartments there, and then I had my apartment in the school, and we were trapped in the school when the war broke out. Um, and we had land, like we had so much, and we lost everything. When we left the school, we left with 3 bags. Then we had to leave 1 bag somewhere else. And then when we left the embassy where we were being transported to the airport, we were told only to bring 1 bag. So by the time we got to Ireland, we had 1 bag between the four of us. Um, Along with, actually, Rami was able to carry a backpack full of his certifications so that he could possibly apply for work here as a doctor. Um, so we arrived here, and you know, resilience, is experiencing kindness, because the people that we encountered. There was a lady in the airport in Budapest who saw us, and we must have looked at an awful sight. But she came up and she held my arm, and she said, "The whole of Ireland has been so worried about you. I wasn't able to sleep last night wondering where you were. And here you are." And it was just so nice. But people all along. And when we got to Ballindine, where my mother and father live, and my mum and dad, like, had pajamas ready for us to wear. We have a
Oh,
picture of us all sitting in matching pajamas.
that's the cutest.
And RT then the next day giving us like a little interview. But like the people of Ballindine, like, they were just so kind. We had the boys in school within a few days, so they were able to get right back into normality. We had like, just bags miraculously appear at my mum and dad's front door full of children's clothes. People would come with like little gift cards. And it's very hard for 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 us. We had been doing quite well in Sudan. We had a great life, a very spoiled life, really, in Sudan, to go to accepting that sort of charity. But at the same time, it was so heartwarming to know that people are so good. And that goodness continued. So when I eventually we were able to get our own place, and we're renting here in Castlebar, and I got my job I got it in both schools that I worked in when I first came home. Um, they were both wonderful, but the second school, the principal, he's just such a kind and amazing person. He To this day, he's just fantastic. Um and he organized a rotation of teachers to drive me to and from work, because I had never learned how to drive. And I'm now living in the west of Ireland. I had never learned this basic life skill. I'd never needed it. And I was afraid of it, to be honest. And I passed first time.
Yay. Go, Kathy.
But the teachers, like, I mean, they did it the first while, and you like, honestly, it's a big ask asking teachers to pick somebody up. That means they have to leave their house 10 or 15 minutes earlier. They have to, like, and they've so many things on a teacher's mind going in and out of school. But they didn't act like it was such an imposition. And I just made friends and community from the mainly female, but not completely female, but mainly female group of teachers who were bringing me out every day.
Irish people are so nice, like, and
Yes.
kind, you
Yeah.
know? And I don't think we give ourselves as a nation the praise that we deserve for being so open, kind, and they looked after you when you needed it the most.
Yeah. Yeah. And like, on every level, like, like, that first year and a half, I mean, I don't know how I got through, in terms of teaching and teenagers. And it had been a while because I'd been head of a school. So going from like admin roles to being back in the classroom again, um, while under the blanket of real, real trauma. Um, it was big. It was big. And they did everything. And even the students. Um were aware because it had been on RTE, and they were aware, and they were kind. They were lovely.
Yeah, and how are you now, and how's your family? How are you all?
Um, yeah, we're fine. We're still renting, and we're almost 50, myself and my husband. Him closer than me.
Shade, shade to your husband. Lovely Rami.
The lovely Rami. Um, but like, yeah, and I guess we have the worry of whether we will ever get to the point of being able to own our own house, because we're very late to the game. Um,
Well, I don't even know if you're late to the game. I think, I am based in the UK, but the housing crisis in Ireland is a massive, massive deal. So I don't know if it's late to the game. It's very hard for anybody to get on the housing
yeah.
ladder now.
Yeah, it is really difficult. But I think being 40 something with two children is hard as well. And my husband, who is a doctor, can't currently work here because we're waiting this English test. So all of his degree, which is through English, his master's, which is through English, his work in the UN, which was all through English, um, and yet he fails parts of this English test. It's very frustrating. And yeah, so he's working, thank God. He's working as a carer, which is a wonderful job. But it's also a minimum wage job. It's and that's he's happy to do so, and I'm proud of him.
Yeah, he's great. I met him last summer in Cork. You were all down in Cork. And he's a lovely, lovely guy. And you're emotionally, I mean, are you doing okay, like after experiencing such a heavy, heavy time?
As I said, for the first year and a half, absolutely not. And I didn't even realize how bad I had been until I think it was last week or the week before, whenever the anniversary of this came up. And I spent a day where all those emotions that I used to feel every day um came back. And and I was just like, I am finding it very difficult. I felt like I wanted to ask, could I go home early? Like it was like, and I felt like that every day for the first year and a half. So, so yes, we're doing really, really well. The boys are doing fabulous and they're very happy. And Rami is happy, obviously happier if he could find himself back to his career. Um, and emotionally, the fact that it came back shows that it's still a part of, it's still there, it's still bubbling away. And I guess only the future will tell what part it will play in my future life. I'm hoping that it will contribute rather than take away.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Thank you for sharing all of those moments with us. So, what comes to mind when you think of Manana Heron? What does being an Irish woman at Bannaheron mean to you?
Um, so I think it's all about community. I think even the mainly ladies, I don't want to leave out the men entirely, but it was mainly ladies, and we connected on such a, and such a level, and we were able to have these wonderful chats. But even when I think back to my childhood and listening to my mammy talking to her sisters on the phone for hours, and like, they rely on each other, and that's what Manana here, and my best friend in Dublin, Min, like, um like I don't know who I'd be without her. Do you know? And Sarah Burke and all of these people, like they become a part of you. So Manana Heron, it's not one person, it's all of us, and we're all here for each other, and we're a community.
Yeah, lovely way of putting it. Who are the Irish women you look up to?
So I'm not going to go for a political figure or an author, which I was tempted to do because I've got a few Irish authors on my radar. Instead, I chose a comedian, a TikTok personality or a YouTuber. Her name is Rena O'Connor. She's from Kerry. And I started listening to her and watching her in Sudan when I was deep in the depths of motherhood and breastfeeding and all of these things, when your hormones are all over the place. And she was just so powerful. She's just a normal person, having a laugh, enjoying life, uh, you know, body positivity, not allowing people to put her down on any level. And I needed that. I needed to know that there were people out there who weren't ashamed of how they looked or who they were. And once again, seeing that brings resilience. Like I just think that all of these positive things all the connections we make in life. That's what brings resilience. And it's a powerful word. And I think sometimes it's just so misunderstood, particularly in education.
Yeah. Rena O'Connor, she's got a huge following on social media, doesn't she?
Yeah, yeah. I enjoy her so much. Not as much as I did when I needed her. But and I definitely needed her. Like I needed her as a parent. I needed her to feel connected to my Manana Heron from Sudan.
Yeah, and that just shows because you're the second person that I've had on the podcast that has mentioned an Irish woman who's really big on social media as somebody that they look up to. Edel Edel's podcast, she mentioned Pippa O'Connor having such a an effect on her because Edel set up her own communications business and Pippa O'Connor set up her business and gave advice and stuff. And you are now after mentioning Rena O'Connor, and I think that's a really lovely example of how actually for good social media can be. Because there's obviously huge talk, and I work in social media for the BBC, huge talk about how bad social media can be for us and for children and teenagers, and that's definitely can be the case. But in the likes of you, an Irish woman living in Sudan, and you needed connection to another Irish woman while you were breastfeeding and looking after your baby, and it can be isolating. And you had her, and like you describe it as you needed her.
Yes, 100%.
Yeah,
Just
I love it. Well,
you know, about I don't want to be taking up much time, but social media is just so important. And I'm also very fully aware as a teacher the dangers. Um, and I don't want to underplay them, but we don't talk about how good it is. I would not be here today. I would not be alive because of the war without WhatsApp, you know, without
really.
Facebook. Uh, at the messages, we were sharing survival tips. We were sharing, like, you know, like we would not have been able to, we would not have known how to connect. Like, yeah, I might not have left when I did, and I might not be here today. So social media saved my life.
Oh, goosebumps again, Kathy. Stop doing this to me. So that's what you were all using in
Yeah, it
Sudan
was
was
most
WhatsApp.
common. Facebook and WhatsApp. Um, yeah, that we had this wonderful group called K-Town Girls, and it was all the women who were married to Sudanese men, and we had a few honorary Sudanese ladies in there as well who had married foreign men. But yeah, K-Town Girls, and sometimes we knew things because we were all so connected. But sometimes we knew things before important people knew things.
Really.
Yeah, yeah.
We'll have to, Kathy, we're going to have to do a separate interview. I don't have enough time for this.
To a whole segment on Sudan.
Yeah, definitely. And there's a book in this. Okay, so your favorite Irish word or saying, and it can be in Irish, Ascuelga, or in English.
As an English teacher, I've always been fascinated by the Hibernian dialect, which is what we all speak. And we've got random throwaways from Shakespearean English as well. And I was going to go for one of those, especially one of those outrageous ones. Um, but instead, I'm going to focus on the Gaeilge and I'm going to focus on hello. I genuinely do not know any other word for hello in Irish other than Giagwitch and Dia Smurgwitch. And Diagwitch is not hello. Diagwitch is God be with you. And Dia Smurgwitch is God and Mary be with you. And as somebody who kind of like self-identifies as a linguist and who is a religion teacher and who is a language kind of like, I think this is fascinating. But I remember my very first year in Sudan, and the ladies would often sit around a table and chat. And all of these Sudanese ladies who I'd be sitting with had a very strange idea of the Western world. Their view of Western kind of like um, women and Western structures are based on Hollywood movies. You know? So when I said to them, we're so similar. You say salam alaikum, which means peace be upon you, and you mean hello. I say which means God be with you. We say God willing, you say inshallah. You say, like, there's just all these connections where we have, intricately bound our religion and our spirituality to the language. And honestly, I found more similarities within Sudanese culture, both Muslim and Christian, because there are a variety of all, and Ireland than I found similarities when I was in the UK.
Really?
Yes. Yes. It was,
That's
yeah. Especially if I was thinking more along 1980s Ireland
yeah,
rather
yeah,
than now. But
yeah.
yeah, the culture, it's so similar. And then when it comes to language, that diagwitch, it's so powerful when you think about it. And when you look at Salam Alaikum, which the Christians over there say as well as
Really, yeah.
yeah.
It's fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. Okay, and now the quick fire at the end. Tato or king,
Tato,
Lyons or Barry's tea.
Barry's. But I have to say that was a bit of a surprise because I always thought that I was a Lyons girl.
And then what happened?
I came home and I went to this shop that does bulk buys and I saw this gigantic Barry's and I was like, well, that's cheaper. And I bought it. And then I was like, with my first cup, I was like, this is home. This is lovely.
Oh, and did you drink tea in Sudan?
Yes. And it was Lipton. And and now I hate the taste of Lipton now. Like I'd drink it if I was in Sudan because I'd have no choice. But like, yeah, so it's not like Lipton has changed my taste buds or something.
You just had to drink it. Can you not get Lyons or Barry's tea in Sudan?
No.
It's a bit like Cardiff.
Exactly the same.
Totally the same. How many cups of tea do you drink a day?
Anywhere between 3 and 5,
Nice.
I think.
Nice.
Yeah, it alternates. It depends on how many cups of coffee I have in a day, because I might switch a coffee for a tea or something like that.
Okay. Okay, sensible. Um, that's it, Kathy. Thank you so,
Okay.
so much for joining me on the Manana Heron podcast. It was so lovely to catch up. And thank you sincerely for sharing your story about, living in Sudan and then coming back to Ireland when the war broke out. Because I remember at the time it was really scary, like everyone was thinking of you, and it was just when you when you got out of there and you were safe, we were all very, very, very happy.
Yeah, it was a huge relief, and it probably took me that first year and a half for my body to realize, you know. But I was so grateful to everybody who was looking after us and thinking of us and praying for us and all the things. Um, yeah, it was wonderful. Thank you. And thanks for having me on. Oh my gosh.
You're
I'm famous
great.
again. Oh no.
You're what?
I said I'm famous again. Oh no.
But this time you're famous for chatting with me, your
Oh
friend.
yes, of course.
Okay, well, say hi to all your family for me, and hopefully we'll see you this summertime when we come back
Oh,
to
that would be
Ireland.
wonderful. Maybe we can go camping.
Oh, very nice. Yeah, because we're actually trying to get into camping, so
Yeah.
that camping
Oh,
would be
excellent.
lovely. So thank you so much, Kathy, and Gurv Mila Magat.
Gur míle maithagat. Bye. Slán leat agus gur míle maithagat.
Bye, slán, slán, slán.